Ruben Amorim's Sporting side are currently top of Liga Portugal with a perfect record, having scored 30 goals and only conceding twice in 9 games. And now it's come out that he is the hot favourite for the Manchester United job. We're going to tell you exactly what to expect, who will be key, and which players might have surprise new positions under Amorim. And I'm afraid there's a couple of question marks as well. This is Manchester United. So this is the lineup that cruised to a 2-0 victory over Porto this season. And in this side, there are several different profiles that give us hints of not only how Manchester United will play under Amorim, but also who is going to shine from the get-go. And I say from the get-go because I think this could be a bit of a process for Manchester United. It's going to take time. Give me a little more time. I need to find the right profiles for the team. The defence is a huge part of Amorim's system, and it props up the whole team due to a few different factors. Now, the first, it's mobility. The entirety of the back three are mobile. So that spells doom for a few of that Manchester United squad. But why is it so important to Amorim? Well, firstly, if you take a look at their average positions from that Porto game, you can see that the back three are quite spread out. Now, this is to aid possession, and it's to allow for a key part of Amorim's tactics that we're going to talk about in just a second. But another thing about this team that we'll go on to learn is that the approach is quite expansive. You can see this in the distances between these players. It's not compact. This is a good thing about the system, but it does mean that transitions are an area that they need to keep on top of. So having centre-backs with pace is important when defending wide spaces, but also in how they react when they have to defend depth. The reason for this expansiveness is to aid build-up. That's the main reason behind it, and this is where we begin to see the hallmarks of this Amorim side. So when the goalkeeper has the ball, he will often play the ball short. Now, a lot of teams will often use a mid-block against Sporting, and so to play the ball short, part of the reason for that is to bait the press somewhat and to bring some players towards them so they can play through. What's really, really interesting here, and a key aspect of that back three, is the width. These two centre-backs peel really, really wide to help aid that build-up. And Onana, as the goalkeeper, being able to play short, is absolutely comfortable with that. And the reason that Amorim wants his centre-backs dropping deep and peeling wide is to entice the opposition into pressing the ball. But one important part about this approach play is that it's not slow, it's not passive. They're going to play the ball nice and quickly. There's a lovely intensity to this Sporting side so that the opposition can't get totally set. There's another reason as well. The reason behind it is often to be able to play an incisive forward pass. And so that short pass gets made in this instance. But then as we move it on, you can see in that second phase, it will be a very incisive pass, and it will be their second ball that is fired into one of the 2 10s that we're going to talk about in a second. And in the process, 5 players, let me count them for you in case you can't count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I know you can probably count, are taken out of the game. They're sort of lured in initially and then subsequently bypassed because they suck those players in, and then they've been able to create this area here of which they love for those 2 10s that we're going to talk about in just a second. So in terms of how Manchester United set up, I think it feels pretty obvious. It's got to be Evans, Casemiro and Maguire. We need that mobility. It's a joke. Relax. Look, there is somewhat of an initial headache for Amorim with which players are available right now. And I think that's an important thing to say, is who's available right now. Now, the reason I say this is because you're missing a player who could potentially be key in this back three. But one player who will be really, really important, and don't worry, we're going to take these guys out now, is that, and look, Evans or Maguire could maybe play as that central player. Maybe the passing is good enough, long-range passing as well, which is an important part of that centre-back's position as well, because sometimes when players do come on, they don't mess about, they'll play that ball in behind. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But it does feel like Martinez could be absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. Technically and athletically, he suits the system. His ability to play direct passes is going to be great in this system. Look, you've bought De Ligt. I think you need to use him. I think, and as the centre of the three, he should also be okay in this system. Might take him a second to get totally used to it. But having played in systems that require technical ability in the past, he's a good fit for that. His metrics are a lot better than people are making out as well. He's in the top 5% for pass completion for centre-backs. And then in that right-sided position, of course, we've got a little bit of a problem. Now, I think the right answer, if Amorim's playing with the current squad that's available, is Lindelof. Now, look, it worries me slightly. And is he the future? Probably not. But I think his speed and ability to defend, depth behind him would be very useful. Or it's sort of the best, it's the next best option in terms of having an out-and-out centre-back, but someone who has played as a right-back, has played as a left-back for the team as well. So in terms of peeling wide, I think he'd be confident in doing that. But of course, Euro would be a fantastic option. And Lindelof, technically, he's not at that technical level. But Lenny Yoro, I think he's... when he's fit, which obviously at some point he's going to be, I think he would be fantastic in playing in a 3. I think it would be very beneficial for his development. And a great example of this being Zeno de Bast at Sporting this season, who has been phenomenal under Amorim. Let's go back to that first phase, because there were 2 players who were completely out of shot. 2 players who in many 3-at-the-back teams would be considered as part of the defence, the wing-backs. Now, the reason that the wing-backs aren't anywhere to be seen is because Amorim sees them more as part of the midfield than he does the defence. Now, granted, sometimes he'll play a more defensive option at either left wing-back or right wing-back at times. But for the most part, he sees them as players who are there to attack rather than to defend. And this can be seen in the positions that they pick up when out of possession. So, Sporting are playing in white, they're shooting in this direction. And this is a great example of exactly what we're talking about, because instead of dropping into a back 5, we can only see 3 here. But of course, in the next line, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the wing-backs actually sit alongside the same lateral plane as the midfield, and with one of the 2 10s also dropping into that midfield line, it creates a wall of 5 in front of a 3-man defence, which makes it very difficult for opposition players to play a forward pass into that central area. When in possession, the wing-backs are seen as out-and-out wingers. So here's Matthias Reyes right here. The left-sided centre-back, he's got the ball in possession, but what I want you to really focus on is the wing-backs and their positions. On the left, you've got Nuno Santos as high and as wide as possible. Meanwhile, Jenny Katamo is on the other side, emulating the exact same thing. And if we draw a line, you can see them pretty much in line, and pretty much in line with the forward line as well. And what this does, they play such a big part in stretching the pitch, and it therefore allows Amorim to play 2 floating 10s in those half spaces. So when I say that the wing-backs are treated as wingers, I mean it. Because the right wing-back, Katamo, actually scored in this game from picking up this position. The wing-backs are given a lot of freedom to attack, but a lot is also demanded from them going backwards, which makes it such an interesting topic when we then try and apply that to Manchester United. Because you've got to consider that both Santos and Katamo, they're pretty much wingers, playing at wing-back. So there's 2 ways of looking at it when you look at how Manchester United would set up under Amorim. So let's talk option 1. You play Dalot and you play Mazraoui. Of course, we've not got Luke Shaw right now. But I think we've kind of not... I don't want to give up on Luke Shaw, but I think it's fair to kind of think about the team without him, because I think it's just been a consistent problem in terms of him being able to stay fit. And look, you play those 2, and you try and squeeze every last morsel of attacking threat out of them. Now, Mazraoui, I've got faith in him. You know, I think he's got the dynamism and attacking quality to play on that right-hand side. And actually, I think Dalot would be fine. Would he be a game changer? Is he an sort of out-and-out winger? No, I think he's a long way off, and I think he flatters to deceive a little bit. I think he's kind of struggling in this team and not having a sort of set position. And maybe, even 5 years ago or 3 years ago, when you have like an out-and-out right-back who was, dominant and crucial as being an interesting, fun, attacking right-back, like Robertson back when they won the league, I think he would have thrived. But I think he's really struggled with having to play different positions, having to invert and all these different things. But Dalot on the left, it gives me a feeling that Amorim, I think, might test this out before maybe moving to a different option. And I think the reason for this is that width is absolutely crucial. Do you know what? I'm actually going to do this because those half spaces for the 10s in here and here, that comes from that width. It's so, so important. And Delo will often, I think, want to naturally kind of come inside because he's right-footed in those kind of areas. And I don't think he will like to make the movements towards the byline, and I don't think he'll be overly comfortable doing it either. It's just not ideal. But one player that might is Garnacho. Trust me, this isn't out of the realms of possibility, and it might not happen in his first game in charge, but if you think from that viewpoint of the wing-backs being wingers, I think it will happen at some stage. Might not happen in the first game in charge, but at some point, Garnacho will play as a left wing-back for this team. I see it. Next is the double pivot. And what's interesting here is that despite it being a midfield pairing, Amorim likes the profiles of the players to be hugely different. But despite the profiles being very different, they actually blend together perfectly and complement each other beautifully. This season, Amorim has favoured the pairing of Morten Hjulmand and Daniel Bragança. Now, last season, it was Hjulmand and Morita. But Morita and Bragança, they're really similar in terms of their profiles. And actually, they're very similar to one Manchester United player in particular. And this is a good example of how both of these players differ. So here we have Bragança right here. Let me just zoom in on him. And then all the way back here, we've got Hjulmand. Hjulmand's instructions are to stay central for the most part and to play simple, short passes from that area, operating in front of the centre-backs. And he's going to play those passes, but it's a maximum of 2 touches to keep the pace of the ball and the pace of the tempo as high as possible. Meanwhile, Bragança is given more of a license to move into sort of wide areas for dialogue with the left wing-back or the left-sided 10. Think Bernardo Silva somewhat, right? But what's also important to remember is that Hjulmand and Bragança don't sway too far away from each other in build-up. When the ball's in those initial stages of build-up, you'll see the two here. Nice and narrow and together and connected. And you can see that both Hjulmand and Bragança have a great understanding of each other's movement and that understanding of where to be in different phases of play. And that's absolutely crucial when it comes to that midfield for an Amorim side. Right, back to the tactics build. So when it comes to Manchester United, I think that this could be an area of the squad that they have players that are most suited to Amorim's style. Positives. Now, firstly, Kobbie Mainoo, I think, is a really, really good fit for this team. He's well suited to being the slightly more attacking midfielder of the two. I think he would be the Bragança in this scenario. Not only does he have great qualities in linking play in the final third, but he's also great at receiving the ball as well, despite that moment against Liverpool. But generally, actually, it's something I would like Mainoo to kind of take more responsibility to go and pick up the ball. I mean, we saw that in the Euros, and we've seen that a million times. And that is a key skill for Amorim's approach. Now, the second player, sorry, I just burped there. Second player is a player that actually has worked under Amorim before. And we need to remember that Manuel Ugarte, was actually sold by Sporting to PSG for £50 million off the back of his performances under Amorim. That's not exciting, I don't know what is. Now, Hjulmand was in fact the Ugarte replacement. So with Ugarte, you will have a good understanding. And look, if you're going to have someone with a good understanding within this team, the guy who's going to sit there and patrol and be at the centre of it all is a good option. That's a huge advantage for him to have. And look, despite being at the base of midfield and distributing long balls being something that you would expect from that kind of player, I don't think that's something that we'll see from him. I don't think it'll be something that we asked of him, as we've spoken about. I think it'll be a lot of direct passing coming from those defenders like Martinez, because he has that kind of in his locker and it allows you to be direct and bypass the press at times. But with Ugarte, I think you've got someone who can understand how Amorim wants to play, and he will play those short passes, and then as a 2, he'll be able to be tenacious and go and win the ball for the team. The one question I do have over Kobbie Mainoo is that with the pitch being nice and wide and big, does Mainoo have the ability to drive past in the middle third? I think in the final third, when there's a lot of players around him, he's so brilliant in possession, he can get out. Can he, from this position here, can he drive past players? Has he got the pace to do that? Let me know. Man United fans, you're going to know better than me in the comments down below. Has he got the pace to go and drive? Now, the attacking three in this team have three different roles, and to properly understand them, we're going to break them down one by one, starting off with Pedro Gonçalves. Now, despite often playing from the left, Gonçalves he's not a pacey direct winger. He's more of a playmaker. And he's actually at times played in midfield as well. And his role in the side has seen him rack up 36 goal involvements since the beginning of last season. And it's a really interesting role in terms of who would fill that same role for Manchester United. Now, this is the type of position that Pedro Gonçalves absolutely bloody loves. There he is in those half spaces that we've been talking about that are so crucial. Now, the reason why he's able to get in those positions, as we spoke about before, is because of the width that's offered by Nuno Santos. So by him, and I think it's always great to sort of draw the lines, by him offering that width, it then offers this half space here for Gonçalves to operate in on that left-hand side. And it also allows him space to then drive into. And it makes it difficult for the opposition as well, because they know, this defender here specifically actually knows, that the pass might come. And so that's often going to freeze this defender, because he wants to be ready to go here. He wants to stay compact with his back line here, but he also needs to be ready to go out to that wing back. And so Gonçalves has got a lot of options there, and it's making life very difficult for the opposition. So his positioning there, but also what he can do once he gets the ball, is absolutely crucial in being effective. But the main role for Gonçalves is to facilitate the striker, Gyökeres. And of course, that's Gyökeres right there. We're going to come back and talk about him in more detail. So what often happens is that he'll get the ball in this position here, kind of just on the outskirts of the midfield, in that half space, and then he will look to drive the ball. And by driving with the ball, he will do it with lots of little touches, because he's great at doing that. And the idea is to take players away from Gyökeres and simultaneously open up the passing lane to him. So as you can see him here, they're all pretty structured at that moment, but as we move it along, when he makes those sort of jinking runs towards the penalty area, now you have a new focus from those defenders who've got to make their way to him, which then creates a little passing lane, be it to Gyökeres, or if he needs to, there can be that driving run from the wing back as well. But it's sucking players out, and he's absolutely fantastic at doing it. Hence the 36 goal involvements. People say stats are for mugs. You know who you are. And because this role isn't one centred around pace and has more of a creative focus, it could mean that Bruno Fernandes is the perfect player for this role on this kind of left-hand side, let's say. His creativity and ability to work well in tight spaces, I think it makes him a really good fit for the role. Bit of an outside shout, but I guess he's a backup as well. And this has kind of been the problem throughout, but maybe there's different areas for this man as well. Is this man here, Mason Mount. Let's think about Mason Mount for a second, because the Chelsea Mason Mount is a player who's incredibly intelligent, is good in these half spaces, but has energy to dribble with the ball, but also the intelligence to see other players around him, and he's a selfless player as well. So I think we could really see a rejuvenated Mason Mount if Bruno Fernandes at any point wasn't available. And that is a huge thing for me, I think, when it comes to Manchester United, is Amorim has to come in and he has to go, I'm not bothered about the names, I'm bothered about the profiles. And I'm bothered about, it's a clean slate. Show me what you can do. And I think that will give these players a real kind of kick up the arse and a freshness that I think they've been struggling with, because the size of the club and the names within it, I think, has been crippling this team a little bit. Right, let's talk Gyökeres, the striker. We did a whole video on him last season. He's been absolutely incredible for Sporting. Amorim has turned him into one of the hottest strikers in Europe right now. And since the start of last season, Gyökeres has scored a total of 48 goals. But what people don't talk about actually enough is he's registered 14 assists from a total of 54 matches as well. And if Amorim can do this with a certain Manchester United player, then I think it becomes very, very exciting. Gyökeres' movement is key for his goals. He often plays as high as possible to be able to make these runs in behind. He doesn't really need to get involved in the link-up play due to having those two number 10s behind him. And so that allows him to focus on his movement and kind of staying out the way, but also pushing that back line back or making them feel uncomfortable in their positioning as well, and facilitating and creating space at times for those 2 10s. But there's also another part of his game that so many people forget about, and that's the runs that he makes into wide areas. And whilst his runs through central areas are super effective from a goal scoring perspective, it's those continuous runs and those continuous runs into the channels at times. It's these types of runs where you see a huge part in him getting those double figures for assists last season. His constant runs into wide or central areas, they often drag defenders out of position, create space for others. He is a really selfless striker, which is, a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it, when you're thinking of someone going out and scoring goals, but he actually helps the team fly so much. And his profile, his endeavour, it does fit very, very nicely with a certain Manchester United striker. So with that pace and endeavour, humility in mind as well, it's absolutely key. I think Man United, they've got 2 options for the striking spot at present, and those 2 are, of course, Xerxes and Højlund. And for this specific role, there is but one man, and this is it now, guys. This is the moment, right? It's very hard to look past Højlund. If I was Højlund, I would go, now. If I want to be world class, I'm at Manchester United, and I've got a manager who is going to really facilitate my strengths, which is my hard work, my pace, my willingness to run those channels, but my, endeavour to get into the box time and time again. And it's one where, like, if I work hard for you, you'll work hard for me. And I think Højlund, it's now, man. Like, it really is. Xerxes is a player who likes to drop into spaces and receive the ball. And that may be useful for Amorim, but not as a 9. I just don't see that happening. Højlund's pace, that willingness to make those runs are going to be key for this team. And at times, Amorim, I think, will instruct Onana, actually, to make those big, longer passes to allow Højlund to run in behind. And that's a viable option when you've got Højlund up top, as opposed to someone like Xerxes. Right, we've got that last spot within this team, the right attacking midfield spot. Sporting currently have Trincao playing there, and he's been awesome for them all season long. He loves to find these sort of pockets of space. In those half spaces, as we've spoken about on both sides, you've got those 2 10s, you've got that bit of freedom to get into those different areas. And as we've spoken about, Højlund kind of making those runs, or Gyökeres, of course, for Sporting. And the other great thing about it, because of the formation, is that these players, they don't need to provide any width, because you're getting that width from those 2 wing-backs. And here's a perfect example of it. Trincao right here in those half spaces, not holding that width, because you've got that width coming from Giovanni Quenda, who's holding that right wing-back position. And this moment is such a great example of Trincao, and also a great example of the synergy that's built by Amorim when he manages the side. Because when Trincao carries the ball towards the Estoril defence, you can see Gyökeres making this run. This diagonal run across the defence, which again drags players away, like we mentioned earlier. And what does that do? It allows Trincao to carry on his run towards the goal, creates a space for him, and allows him to get a shot away. And not just get a shot away, guys. Score a goal as well. And this type of synergy is something that the Manchester United players are going to have to learn. And I think it's something that Manchester United fans are going to love to see. But the big question from Manchester United's perspective is, who does this? Okay, let's get comfortable here, because this is the one. This is the shout that could get clipped up. I might get in trouble here, but Trincao is a kind of like a Phil Foden profile. So in terms of a like-for-like player, you just don't really have that kind of guy. In terms of sort of the tight feet, you've got someone like Diallo, who could come in and do that, right? But he's kind of more of a winger. You've got someone like Xerxes, who we've spoken about. I don't really feel like he's that 9, because he's not going to run those channels like Højlund is. But he can drop deep and pick up the ball in those areas. But can he drive with the ball with the same kind of intensity? Maybe. And will he be able to work back and work hard for the team as well, for someone who's kind of been playing as a centre forward for the last, couple of years, let's say? here's another option. Now, one thing that Sporting have done, and we spoke about it a year ago, or not even a year ago, was it, when Amorim was linked with Liverpool, was the role of Marcus Edwards. Now, Marcus Edwards is left-footed, but will play in these areas and has the ability and running intensity to then work into these channels and then kind of cut in. Now, with Rashford, you're not going to be able to get that. But what you might get, and what might work quite well with someone like Mazraoui or Dalot on this right-hand side, as someone who's not an out-and-out kind of a winger, even though they're playing as a wing-back, is someone who will kind of run the channels in this half. Now, are you wasting the use of Højlund a bit here, a little bit? I think this is what he might end up doing, is giving Rashford a chance in this position and seeing if he enjoys it, because what he can do is he is technically fantastic and he can run with the ball brilliantly. And maybe not in this channel over the course of his career. He's actually been much better, obviously, on this side of the pitch because he's able to cut in on that right foot. And so not being that left footer, it's not ideal, but I think it's Rashford that they'll give the opportunity to. But there is one man. There is one man who has struggled, but in terms of profile and fit, is probably the best fit. I think, look, Mason Mount, you can have another discussion here. Can he play on that position? He has played on the right-hand side for Chelsea as well. So could be an option that you want to go down. But let's talk Anthony. Yes, he cost a lot of money. But could he really offer something? You know, we talk about those movements from Marcus Edwards and then cutting in. That is something that he can do. You know, maybe it's not time to give up on Anthony just yet. Maybe he could thrive in this Amorim system. So how long is it going to take Amorim? Which players are going to thrive? Which areas are you concerned with? And if you want to know how Højlund could turn into Gyökeres, because Amorim did it, you can find out by watching this video right here.